knowing.
All right, man. Welcome to Crrow777 Radio. This is episode 225. Today, I have Jason Lingren with me, and I have Derek Soroka. We're going to talk about some law ideas, the rights ideas again. What we've done is we've looked for people who have run into huge hassles, educated themselves up, and then gone at it to deal with things like simply changing the title or the deed of a house. Things like this. It's crazy what we run into. What we're going to do here, just so people don't lose their dang minds, is we're not going to label common law, admiralty. We're not going to put labels on it. What we're doing here is we're addressing things people have done that are provably workable. For today, the things we're going to talk about occurred in the state of Michigan. Anyhow, welcome, Jason.
Good morning, Crow.
How's it, man? You're in your new place finally.
It is very dirty and very, well, just things everywhere. But yes, I'm in my new place.
Yeah, I can imagine. Moving is among the worst things. I hate having to move. I've done it so many times. Anyhow, do we have anything to add in, or should we get Derek in here?
No, let's move forward.
All right. Welcome, Derek.
Hi, guys. How are we doing?
Good, man. Did I butcher your last name, or did I get that straight?
You nailed it right.
All right. I keep trying to say Soroka, but I'll say Soroka and try to keep it. Anyhow, what we're going to do is we're going to work from the set of bullet points here, Derek, and I'm going to have Jason introduce the backstory that occurred from you when you got out of the U.S. Army after a 12-year service period. You came out as basically what would be the equivalent in most branches as a staff sergeant in charge of platoons. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because I served in the military. And I know that when you're in charge of other human beings in the military, you're responsible. That's why you're there. And to make E6 even makes you responsible, or you wouldn't be there. Anyhow, Jason, you want to cue us up here?
So, Derek, let's start with your earliest intentions and all that. What made you join the military? How was your military career? And what got you into studying the law?
Sure. So I joined, like many people have, directly after 9/11. Thought that our country was under attack. I noticed a lot of my friends were very kind of living in fear of it and would rather just leave the country instead of fight the good fight. And I'm the kind of guy who would rather take the fight to the enemy instead of having the enemy bring it here. So I joined with good intentions. And when I got there, and this is kind of opposite of the law stuff, but when I got there and I found out that our intentions of being over in Iraq were not what we were doing. So maybe we can save that for another day's talk.
I did the same thing. I served during the first Gulf War, and it became pretty apparent. But let's just jump over. So you get back home, and basically you're going to inherit your family's home. You're going to make an effort to transfer the property deed, and you get a zone ordinance violation. And so you started to educate yourself about the law in your state of Michigan. And let's jump right in. So first of all, you get home, you inherit property. Let's take it from there. Paint the picture.
Okay, so when you do the transfer title ownership from property to property, you usually go to some title agency company locally. That's what my mother and I did. After my father passed away, we got the inheritance from that. We decided I would take over the family home. She would get her own new place and just transfer title to me. So we went to this title agency place close by, and we did what is called a deed transfer. And you pay for it. They print up a new deed. They register you as the new taxpayer. And then from there, everything seemed fine. I thought everything was right.
I'm sorry to interrupt here, but let's be very clear. You're doing this at the municipal level, right? Just in your hometown kind of thing.
Yep, it's hometown. The property transfer person who does it, they aren't necessarily an employee of the government, but they are usually a notary because they have to notarize the actual deed to make it an official legal document.
I interrupted your train there. I apologize, but I wanted to be clear. We've talked so many about the different levels of where people can file things and do things. So go ahead and carry on where you were going there.
Right. And me being the curious person I was after looking into conspiracy theories and stuff, I had overheard something about our deeds for our houses not being actual titles, being some type of feudal title in nature, to where It's a lower level of ownership. It's not full ownership. So I decided to go to the county records at the Register of Deeds. That's what we have here locally, and thumb through and see everybody that owned the property before me. I printed out their deeds all the way back till the state of Michigan issued it to the first technical homeowner. And I had noticed that between a vehicle title, which is called a certificate of title, you see one person on there, and you see the identification of the property, what it is. When it's a house or land, you have the grantor, which is the person selling the property, the grantee, the person who's receiving, and then your township will put their own stamp on it as well. And I always thought that was kind of weird to have multiple parties if we're just explaining ownership of one person. So I researched further. I compared it to things that I looked up that seemed to compare more to a trust. A trust is set up almost in the same fashion. You have a trustor and a trustee. Trustor sets up the trust. Trustee receives maybe the property, maybe responsibilities that have to do with the property. And then there's a beneficiary. That's the person that pretty much doesn't have to do any work. They just kind of receive the profits of the property, or may receive the property later on. And when I looked at my deed after researching that, it seemed like the township itself, if they're receiving tax revenue from me, then that would kind of make them a beneficiary if this was a trust. So I looked back in history and found out this is the same way the monarchs did it for feudalism. The king was the beneficiary. If a knight had to go on a crusade or whatever, he may entrust his property to somebody else to use it. So he was a trustor. Person using the property was trustee. Beneficiary was still the king. That's how feudalism worked.
And that's what you found to be correct about your deed when you got out of the military, to simply transfer it into your name. All that research informed you that that was the situation with your family home.
Correct. So then during this time, I had received a civil infraction, which is just a ticket from a zone ordinance officer on my front door about a couple junk items on the side of my house, which like 3 things. And I had an unregistered boat trailer in my backyard. So he would have had to come on my property, walk around my house to notice that the license plate on the boat trailer was no good. But I wasn't in use, And I thought, this is ridiculous. So I called him up, the actual officer who wrote the ticket, and said, hey, I'm not part of your system anymore. After I found out what you guys are doing with home ownership, I started severing my ties with the state of Michigan. So I had already had the intention of leaving the state of Michigan when I got this ticket. This would have been around June of 2017. And I went up to the township office, told them I'm not going to pay it, and we're just going to have to go to court over it, and they're going to have to try to prove that they have jurisdiction over me.
How did you know to do that, though? Was it the research that you were describing that led you to understand that jurisdiction is an important part of this? And also, ancillarily, is it your contention that you realized that you had this kind of feudal system on the deed to your home and you knew it wasn't correct?
Yeah, both. During this time was probably near the beginning of me looking into what's going on with even the conspiracy side of what's going on with property ownership here in America. And that led me down the path with Mark Stevens, which your last guest about this topic, Alfonso, mentioned. And Mark Stevens is a very good set-off for learning about how does law actually apply to a person, and can the courts actually prove that?
Everyone has said the same about Mark Stevens. As a matter of fact, we may be trying to contact him. I don't know if he comes out and does things, but we've heard all good things about Mark. Mm-hmm. And Alphonse marks him as kind of a mentor.
Yep. But he kind of got to his zone and stayed there. He leveled off and didn't go any further. I've taken it way past what he does, but he's still definitely a good person to get a hold of. But continuing on, I took this ticket to court and decided that they were going to have to prove that I was a part of their system. And when I found out what was going on with these titles, I immediately went to the Secretary of State here in the state of Michigan, which is where you get your driver's license here and all that kind of stuff. A lot of places have DMV. And I surrendered my driver's license back to the Secretary of State because I figured that was the point of entry where I decided as a legal adult that I would be a citizen of the state of Michigan. So if I'm going to now say that their laws don't apply to me, I need to rescind that contract and start severing ties. So they took it back, no problem. They thought it was a little weird because almost nobody would ever do that, to just voluntarily surrender your driver's license back. And I unregistered all my equipment from them.
How did you do that? Did you just have to file forms when you went up to the state capitol or wherever it is to do this, because there's no DMV in your state? Did you have to fill out certain forms to surrender or undo your licensing agreement for your vehicle and the registration on all your vehicles?
It wasn't even much of a form. It was just like me writing on a notepad saying, I'm Derek Soroka. I no longer want your services. Please unregister all my stuff.
Okay.
An official declaration, basically, as a living man kind of thing?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And that was at the Secretary of State office. So you don't have to go in like a big government building or anything like that. I'm sure wherever you go to get your driver's license in your state, that's where you would do this.
Yeah, for most people, that's a hassle. It's called the DMV, but go ahead.
Yeah. So now that I've kind of put myself in that predicament, I had a little more backing. I could say, prove that I'm a citizen of the state of Michigan. Your laws apply to me. So when I started going to these hearings for this civil infraction ticket I got, you start out with an informal hearing, which is just the magistrate and the officer that wrote the ticket will also be in there, and just a room with you guys and the magistrate, and then we'll both explain each side. And when it was my turn to talk, I told the magistrate, I'm not a citizen of the state of Michigan. I'm not even a citizen of the United States, so you don't have jurisdiction. He said he's not going to play that game. So I realized at that point, nothing that I said is going to be recorded in that room. So he's going to be able to get away with saying whatever he wants to bully me. So I left there peacefully. I cleaned up the little things that they thought were a nuisance, but I was not going to register my equipment with the state of Michigan. As more hearings progressed, they kept asking, well, why didn't you take care of this? I told them, I'm not going to be part of your system, so I'm not going to play that game. And then they decided that they sent a hearing notice at one point. I had missed it, some mail debacle, and then they immediately entered a default judgment, just the magistrate, saying that because I missed a hearing, the judgment's put in, I have to pay all this money, and trying to close the case immediately. So I filed an appeal. This is just with the local county court, a request for appeal to reopen the case back up. I had to pay a bond amount, and then that got denied. So at this point, I realized of all this, I still haven't even entered a plea to whether I was guilty of anything. So there's something wrong with the judicial system here. So I told the magistrate, you know what, I'm done with these little hearings where I'm not going to be recorded. I'm ready to go to trial. And he tried to say, oh, you don't want to do that. That's going to get costly for you. You got to pay for an attorney and all this. Nope. I handled it myself. So then I looked up online to find the actual court forms I needed to fight this case. And nobody really explains to you which court forms you need to find. So you just need to go to your local state's website for court forms. And I found mine just by Googling it. Ours is SCAO up here in Michigan. And you got to kind of thumb through what type of thing is it? Is it a civil action? Is it criminal? And then just any form that looks like it could help you with your case. Even if you want to enter in an order for dismissal, you can do that. And that's exactly what I did. But first thing I knew that I needed to do was to fill out the answer sheet, the civil answer sheet. Anytime you get a ticket, could be a traffic ticket, could be a civil infraction like I got. That's just an officer witnessing something that happened, making a claim. But if you don't respond in your defense on paper, you look guilty. So I filled out the answer sheet. And from there, that's one of the only court forms where a defendant actually has a signature line. And you can tell them, hey, I'm not this is not right. I'm not part of your system. You have no personal jurisdiction. Check off the blocks you want, sign it. And then also you need to enter into the court what you want that court to do, what you think it should do.
Now, what's the name of this document again? And is there a name other than the number you've cited for the state of Michigan? Does this document have a name?
It's called appearance. It's the appearance form. It's normally what attorneys would have to fill out to put themselves on the case. Like there's even a line for a bar number and all that. But this is the place where this is the form where you establish your legal standing in the court. So if you're going to make a battle based on, oh, I'm sorry, we're talking answer civil. I totally got off the appearance one. The answer sheet is the first form, answer sheet. Then after that, you fill out your appearance form. That's the one where attorneys normally fill out their stuff. You have to explain on there your legal standing. So tell them who you are and explain. There's a way to request personal jurisdiction challenge, and that's called a special appearance. So somewhere on that form, you have to say, I'm appearing under special appearance. And that will open up the door for you to be able to challenge personal jurisdiction. You have to put whatever you want that court to do on paper. Almost anything you say in court means nothing.
Derek, did you find out when all this was started? How far back now? Obviously, most of the states, besides a few, have been around since the 1800s. So when did they start putting all these ridiculous ordinances and all that in, if you have any idea?
I don't know when. I'm sure it's all based on when each township developed. The townships are the newest part of it. You know, the counties, a lot of the counties are even older than the states.
Doesn't the history trail of your deed for your home, I mean, was the first person in a feudal situation? You reviewed those documents, so we could look at it that way, if you understand what I'm asking.
The first one just says land grant. It doesn't
gifts, right?
In fact, it even says patent on the very first one. It's a land patent. And I'll explain that in the later version of the show, what goes on with that.
Okay.
But yeah, then you can see through all the documents as it progresses. It starts turning into deeds, warranty deeds, all the different types of deeds they have. You'll start seeing that specifically labeled on the paper. And that's when you can tell that you've lost your actual ownership rights.
All right, let's try to keep on the straight and narrow. You filled out two forms, an answer, and what was the other one called again?
Appearance.
Appearance. So those two forms are now filed. You've said special appearance on the one because you're not going to submit to jurisdiction.
Right. And now that you fill out your appearance form, you mentioned special appearance on there, you have now legally put yourself into the court. So if you don't ever fill that out, they're just going to put you in however they want. And you might not get much rights, much protection at all.
What are the options?
What do you mean?
Well, you said that they'll do it for you. What does that mean exactly? Like, what would they possibly put you down as, this over that kind of a thing?
So, like, they don't recognize your rights necessarily. You have to exercise your constitutional rights. They are not self-executing. And if you're not legally present in the courtroom by paper, they don't technically have to honor your constitutional rights. So they may treat you like a ward of the court, where they say you have to have an attorney because you're not even competent enough to speak. It's almost like you're not even there.
Yeah, I've understood some of this before, where they basically look at you as an imbecile. You are not fit to speak for yourself.
Right. And this is something Mark Stevens never mentioned in the stuff I've seen. But if he would have mentioned that would have helped out a lot of people, I'm sure. Just filling out that appearance form.
Well, to be fair, there's a lot of trailblazers here, which is why you're with us. And just for everyone listening, we're laying down things that were successful here. I know it's tedious, but let me tell you something. It sounds a little tedious. Yeah, people got to live and do things in the world to have to deal with this nonsense. But let's go from there. So you're going to come into a special session or whatever the heck it's called, not having submitted to jurisdiction.
Right. So we got those two forms in. Now I'm legally present in the courtroom without even the trial starting, just because my papers are filed. And I can now tell the court what I think it needs to do. So they made me pay a bond. I told them, I ordered the court to pay me back every dime that they took from me.
What was the charge on the bond, if you don't mind me asking?
It was, gosh, I can't remember how much the bond wasn't too expensive, but it was the almost like fee for missing a hearing was like $125 alone.
Okay, go ahead. Keep going here.
The total ended up being $185, but I ordered the court to pay me that back in a release of funds form. Then I ordered the court to dismiss the case, and there's going to be a block there that says with prejudice or without prejudice. So if you check with prejudice, then you're telling the court you can never try me for this type of action again. And if you check without, then they can reopen another case similar whenever they want.
That seems like just a pitfall. I mean, come on. So what they're doing is they're playing the 50-50 game. You know, maybe someone won't check the right box and we can come screw with them. So it's beyond the pale what goes on. All right, keep going here. Keep pushing.
And on these forms now, you don't have a signature line. Only the judge does. So it's almost like they try to think that the judge is the only one that can make orders in a court. So I created my own signature line on these forms. And I signed it and I wrote defendant underneath it and I dated it, each form. So it was under my authority that this action occurs in court. I don't need the judge to sign.
So just to put to rest all the capital, not capital, cursive, and you just signed your name as you ever would, right?
That's right.
Okay, go ahead.
I put an order of no trespass also, just to tell them, stay off my property, you know. I don't even care if it's a tax appraiser. If you're coming on my property with a weapon, I could have kids in my backyard. My dog could be in my backyard, you know. We don't need an uninvited incident like that happening. So I put all that into the court, and I even showed up for the first hearing that was scheduled just to find out that they already closed my case. Prosecution dropped. They did a null prosecute form. They basically told the judge, oh, he fixed all the problems that we said, so we're good to go. And the judge, he has a little line that says he's ordering his court to release the funds back to me every dime I requested. So that was the final order. It was all put in. It was all done before I even stepped in the courtroom.
Everyone listening, here's the important thing. I can already see the comments coming in of people who know a better way. Maybe you do. Maybe it's different in your state. But what you just heard was a success story. That's why we're covering it. The way I view what's going on here is very few people understand how to proceed, how to defend their rights, and how to deal with the court systems we have to deal with. But Derek, let's get back. So you still have a property deed that's basically under feudal ideas, unless did that somehow get resolved during the course of all this?
This battle is still happening. So now that was just a zone infraction, and I won by lack of personal jurisdiction. Now I'm battling county and the state of Michigan because of the property taxes. You know, what right do you have to charge me to stay on my own land, my house, if I technically own it? That's always been kind of weird to me.
Good question.
Like, I can understand, like, if the local municipalities say, hey, we're requesting this money, we need this so that we can provide you services. Hey, no problem. I'll give you whatever you want, you know, but don't hold my property ransom to get that money. If it's mine, it's mine.
All right. So let's start at the beginning here. You've got a deed. You've done the backstory all the way back to the original owner. You've just gotten out a 12-year stint in the military during wartime, I might add. You've served your country, and you find out you don't even own your own damn house. It's under some feudal nonsense. Take us through it. Where did you start? Where did it go?
Right. So you can get your deeds or do the title search through your county records, or you can also go to the state. I live really close to the capital of the state of Michigan, so I have access to a big library, and they have an archive section which has all the old land patents and all that. They have a law library which explains how the law progressed through the state of Michigan, to which I found out. I looked up the exact laws that the property tax was being enforced under, where it originated from, and how it progressed. And this was all the way back 1893 is when the first property tax law came out from the state of Michigan. And this law said that the transaction, title transfer, that transaction will be taxed, but that's it. So the only time it was you originally taxed back in the day was just when you went to do the property transfer title. And then that was it. There was no reoccurring property tax. And now there is. So over time, they worded it to say, well, this money pays for offices and officers and everything. So when they put salaries, people's salaries behind the revenue coming in, they basically made it mandatory for everybody.
Well, let's point out another thing. There are plenty of people who will state, and I think rightly for most states, that originally the only taxes being drawn were from businesses. And I don't know if every state's, but I just want to put on the record that what you're doing is you're going back, doing the research and figuring out what's going on. So right now you're finding out that you're getting taxed, and you figured out where it started, and you figured out that the salaries of, your local mayor or the city council or whatever, these people are all tied to the supposed reason you're being taxed.
Right. And through this process, I also decided to look up trust law. I'm already in the law library. They have the trust law there too. Come to find out, in one of the, it was a probate and trust journal or something, one of their law books up there at the state law library, it said that the purpose of registering your trust is to establish jurisdiction. And guess where you register your deeds to your property? Same place that you register your trusts, at the county register.
So wait a minute. Let me try to understand what you just said. So a lot of people have had parents that have passed away. The house was put in trust before that. Are you saying that dealt with the jurisdiction problem by having the house in trust and their family trust?
Yep. All trusts are getting registered into the state.
Does that make a whole, even my family stuff, some of that is in trust. Does that mean that my family actually owns that deed?
I would say no. And the common misconception is that a deed is a thing. A deed is kind of like a recording. It's a legal action. So even a presidential pardon is a deed. So we got to kind of not think of a title being a document. A title is just an explanation of a person's relationship to an object. That's what title means. What are you entitled to do with that thing? Do you own it? Are you just allowed to use it? That's what a title is.
All right, go ahead. Continue on, please.
Well, I interviewed a realtor, local realtor. I interviewed a real estate attorney, and I interviewed a trust attorney, all local people. I recorded them on audio just to be able to compare notes. And it seemed like that they either couldn't give me a straight answer, or they understood that there's no such thing as a title document. It's metaphysical. So how are you going to prove that you own something if you don't have a legal document saying you are the owner? That's a big problem. And this is what I think that the states used to bring feudalism back into our country after the Civil War. As they turned property ownership into more of a trust relationship, registered it into their jurisdiction, and just said, everything is ours now. You now have to pay us to use it.
All right. So how did you proceed?
So from there, I got my property tax bills from the county. I wrote emails to them telling them, hey, I'm not part of your jurisdiction anymore. I just had a case proving that in your own county. And they didn't seem to care. I realized I wasn't getting anywhere with the county, so I decided to file a federal complaint. And just like your Alfonso said in your other episode, that if you want to get an action against, your local county, your state, for a violation of the U.S. constitutional rights, and yes, your right to own property is inherent in that, you have to take it to a federal court.
Let's make a critical point for everyone listening. Alphonse laid it down in Alphonse's words. If I remember correctly, he said you'll get run over by your local jurisdiction, but he said that's not a problem because it's giving you a record to work with.
Right.
And as Derek has just pointed out, you got some rights in this world. Just so happens that they're up at the federal level. As Alphonse laid down, the lowest level is municipal. Above that is state in most cases. I'm being very general. Above that would be the federal idea or the Constitution. So please proceed. You've gone into federal jurisdiction.
Yep. So I had to learn so much stuff. This took me 3 years of learning all these different things I had to do. Now I had to figure out how to draft a complaint form, which is basically like you're creating your own memorandum. Got to have the title page, the case, the person you're suing, your information, and then you have to list cause of action, why you're bringing this case, what you're saying that the other party's doing is wrong. Then you have a paragraph called jurisdiction and venue, where you have to explain why the federal court has the right to hear the case. So you are yourself empowering the court to hear the case. That's stuff that I know he tried to mention. I'm not going to critique the way he went because, I'm not here to bash anybody. I went a little bit different. So I went against, is also against conspiracy against civil rights. Mine was just a little bit different. All I had to do was file it under federal question. So there's 2 ways federal court can hear your case. It's either your local government disobeyed the U.S. Constitution, and you can prove it. That would be called a federal question. Or 2, the case is between 2 parties of different states, and that would be considered diversity jurisdiction. You'll find all this out when you'll have to print off, I think it's Title 22 or 28, might be 28 of the U.S. Code. And just to take a quick sidestep, when you want to understand what citizenship really means, it's a legal binding contract you have with your government agency. Citizenship is a relationship between a person and the government. So that's a binding contract. And what does that contract look like? One side is the Constitution, the other side is the statutes. It's a quid pro quo relationship.
Now, are there tiers to citizenship, though? Like you're a township citizen, you're a state citizen, you're a federal citizen, that sort of thing?
The only thing that I've seen is state and federal, and I do believe that it's 2 citizenships, not 1, because you can get charged for the same offense from both those jurisdictions, and it's not considered double jeopardy. So you are a state citizen, if you choose to still be that, and a federal citizen. They both have their own constitutions. They both have their own set of statutes that they expect you to abide by. And that's supposed to be a voluntary system, When you hear a lot about the sovereign citizen movement, they kind of have a point because you're not forced to be a citizen. You can rescind that. If you rescind your federal citizenship, you could get exiled out of the country. So that might not be the best thing to do. But if you rescind your state citizenship, you still have all your U.S. constitutional rights. That's a whole different contract. And that's what I've done. Still with me so far?
Yeah. I have so many questions, but every time we stop, we kind of break the chain. So just go ahead, keep going forward.
Okay. So citizenship is a contract. You got 2 of them. I broke 1 of them. That's why I said state doesn't have personal jurisdiction over me. Getting back to my case, the things that I used for sources to learn were National Archives on the internet that's the official U.S. government's website for the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, and all that. You can see that in transcript form on there. And then there's another website called the Government Publishing Office, GPO. This one breaks down like each amendment and it explains it, judges talking about it, what it truly enforces, different cases that were used to enforce it. So that's definitely good to have. I recommend everybody using that. The U.S. Code, like I mentioned before, that's where all the statutes are. Just like Alfonso said about the state rules of evidence and civil procedure or criminal procedure, there's also federal rules of civil procedure, criminal procedure, and evidence. So if you were to sit back and just take all the sources you're expected to know to be a legally binding citizen, it would just baffle you how much stuff they expect you to know.
Well, this is kind of the point. Most people don't even understand they're in these agreements or contracts, whatever the heck they want to be called. And that's the problem of what's happened here. I'm told by people who are older in my family that my grandparents, when they were still here, were much more involved with constitutional ideas and government and these types of things. And it had not gone so far afield but this is what I can state. In my lifetime, and I was born in the early 60s, by the time I was getting up into where you should be learning about government and the Constitution and all that, it was already becoming something else. Some people had it called civics, and it kind of started to go towards social studies or just anything to kind of remove it from the curriculum, up to now, where what's gone on is it's a complete joke. Now you're going to go to a university online and act like you've got an education that's valuable. My point here is it's a boondoggle. And what you're pointing out is that who would have time to work and feed the dog and raise a child to know all these things? And that's the problem. It's not doable. For a human being to exist and do all the things that a human being has to do in the course of life, to turn around and have to basically get a law education, it's not feasible for most of us. We got about 10, 15 minutes, Derek. So let's try to get somewhere meaningful before we got to take the break for the second hour.
All right. Yep. In addition to the school stuff, that's one of the fixes. They have to get this into the curriculum immediately. And when I looked at a lot of stuff my kids brought home, it was, what state do you live in? So immediately at a young age, the kids are now going to admit what government they belong to. That seems kind of a
trap.
It is a trap. It's a trap, just like how we learned about our solar system and all that stuff. We're not smart enough to be able to debate that. Going on from there, I also have a Black's Law dictionary, which is the 10th edition, which I think is still the most recent one. It's huge. It was kind of expensive, but that gives me the definitions of terms that I had to use for a lot of my court documents. Some of the court documents are titled with words I didn't know. So I had to get that dictionary to find out what they mean. And this dictionary has court cases that explain why that word means that definition. And a lot of stuff is different. Like the word person can be a corporate entity. That is in there. What also is in there that I found out is the word state. The word state is not a physical place. So if you tell people you live in the state of Michigan or the state of Ohio or wherever, you're only telling them that you have a legal residency in a jurisdiction. That's not a physical place. This place already has a name here. It's called Michigan.
Isn't it a different thing with the state of Michigan and Michigan State? They're actually two separate things. One is, like you said, a metaphysical, and the other one's the actual physical place.
So if you're going to use those two, the state of Michigan is basically saying the government of Michigan. And then Michigan State sounds more like a corporation of the state of Michigan, such as Michigan State University, our school, stuff like that. And here's another fun fact. University of Michigan was actually formed before the state of Michigan. So they formed in 1817. This state didn't get created and entered into the Union until 1837. So it precedes the state of Michigan, and that kind of blows people's minds. Like, how is that possible? Because a state is a government. It's not a physical place.
So we've got a few minutes here. Let's get back on the trail of how you're proceeding to deal with the deed that is under feudal type control.
All right, so I have the correspondence with the local county about the property taxes and all that. I sent them the court documents, all that. They still think that they have the right to do whatever. I switched my argument over to a originalism argument where I basically tell them, here's how the forefathers set this up, where things went wrong. And then at the end of my legal argument, I am explaining what I've already implemented to help change things. And what I did was I immediately decided that if my deed is not going to prove that I own this property, I need to make my own title to own the property. So I laid a land claim big enough to encompass the entire county. That way, I'm creating a new zone of jurisdiction where I can start helping everybody in this county get their title back to their land, because the county and the states, they're not doing it.
Damn. There it is, man. There it is. We're all freaking connected. It's one thing to get yourself out of the mustard, but when you die, the people you love are right back in the mustard. Square one, contending where you had to contend. Hey, man, kudos to you for recognizing that very important point. Just to pull yourself out here is not enough, because it doesn't remove the problem. But anyhow, let's try to maximize what we got left here in hour one. So you're making a claim for basically what amounts to your county or some such.
Right. And I did that by, first off, making my own certificate looking document that I found at a local Office Max, typing my own declaration of land claim. And in the description of the property, I literally took the paragraph from the old territorial law book of Michigan before it was a state. This was the paragraph that created Ingham County. And I put that directly into my land claim saying, I'm claiming all of this area. And then I signed it, dated it, put that on a big poster board, said legal notice. I posted that up at all four corners physically of the county. And, I got a couple calls, got a couple emails. People weren't too freaked out about it. They were just curious what was going on. And I also posted it in the local newspaper. I paid over $100 for that so that my land claim was in the classified section of the local newspaper, and it was up for a month. It went out to multiple different other publications in the area as well.
Wow.
So,
well, I got to cut to the chase before we go on. Does this work?
We're going to find out.
Okay, carry on. Carry on.
So this is my fight. My case is still open right now. There's a federal magistrate that tried to shut it down. He was listing things that were completely irrelevant to my case, and I wrote a rebuttal to it and explained how those don't apply to me. And I've entered in all my evidence I have. I've created a PowerPoint presentation on discs, submitted those into the federal court also, and then COVID came in. And then the federal courts got shut down.
You know how many possible wins that Jason and I have covered that this pandemic has stopped. It's insane. There's one going on in Australia where they've clearly won to show that the fake queen they invented ain't going to cut the mustard. So let's get a little bit further in here. So
let me get the in rem in personam thing real quick. I can skip that one.
Okay.
So when I went to the county court, I'm starting to have hearings and let them know, hey, I filled out forms and everything. You don't have, your laws don't apply to me. They told me and informed me, oh, don't worry, we're not suing you. We're suing the property. I'm like, well, how's my property going to defend itself in court?
I think that's why they're suing it. It's like, yeah, go ahead. There's another convenient trap.
Yep. And this is called in rem jurisdiction. This is the same tactic that is used in civil asset forfeiture that was rampant all over the country. Police were pulling people over in their cars and confiscating their vehicles, money, saying, oh, we think you used this for drug trafficking or whatever, No proof. Person never got charged with anything, and their stuff got seized. So our local governor here decided that she's going to enact laws to make sure that if property gets taken from somebody and they're going to use that jurisdiction, that for one, they can't use that jurisdiction. They would have to charge the person and convict them of something criminally before taking their property away from them. Now, that completely contradicts what goes on with property taxes. So they sue the property itself. When I go in, it don't matter what I filed into the court. It doesn't matter what I say in the court. My U.S. Constitution's not with me. I'm not there legally because I was never summoned to court. I was never charged with anything. And so they can just steamroll me.
Let's call it what it is. It's stealing. It's one-sided game called stealing. But what you're pointing out is the difference between in rem and in personam, right?
Exactly. In personam is what was used in the zone ordinance violation. So I was able to fight that. If you have a criminal offense, they have to use in personam. So your constitutional rights are with you. So get this. If you are suspected of committing a crime, you have more constitutional right to your property than a person who is behind on tax payments. That should blow your mind. So now I've let the federal court know this is what's going on. I can prove it. I can see that this all started after the Civil War. And in part two, we can explain who's been a little bit behind this whole movement.
There is a whole kind of occulted knowledge around the Civil War. People who I consider very knowledgeable with vision beyond what two eyes offer have pointed out that it was a bit like separating the head, the north from the south, the body. Well, we may get into that someday, but let's try to wrap up and leave this in a fair place for the hour one because we're getting close. So let's tie a bow on what's gone on here as you've tried to get the deed to your house out from under a feudal situation where you basically don't even own it.
Right. So to wrap up, what I got to do is my federal case needs to win. I need to get it at least served to the state of Michigan. Right now, they're not. It's just sitting idle. But once it gets served to them, the federal court can overtake what's going on with the state action.
That's a little disconcerting because when the courts shut down, isn't that in fact a violation of our constitutional rights? We have no path. There's no door. There's nowhere to go. And I would point out one of the people who was going over rights had, and I forget where it was drawn from, whether it was amendments or something, actually had the idea of quarantine in it. And the idea that was allowed under constitutional ideas was that a quarantine in an emergency situation could move forward hence for 14 days, but you quarantine sick people. Imagine that. They use common sense, not the entire world. And this is what has me a little worried about what's going to happen to our courts. Is something different going to come back from these closures? And how was it that if we all have rights of some sort, that they can stop the very places put in place to protect those rights? Okay, so basically, let's sum up here. You got your little municipal things like Alphonse. It was the same situation. Some code dude came tromping on his law. You dealt with that successfully forthwith. That's over. That's done. And I think you are under the assumption that you will never be hassled in that way by the municipality again because of the result of what you did. But the whole thing that started this is when you came back from the army, you recognized that when you tried to change title, or basically the deed of your house, there is a difference there. You found that there was some feudal nonsense going on, and there were beneficiaries, and all this anti-constitutional, against the rights of a living man stuff was going on with what most people would consider to be their family or ancestral home in some cases. And that's what you have initiated, teaching yourself along the way with mentors, and you are moving towards getting it up, as Alphonse recommended, into the federal court system where you can get a ruling. And to put a fine point on it, if you find success at that level, you've just made a claim on your county and you've lifted every living man and woman out from under the yoke in your county. I'd be very damn surprised if this became a smooth as butter thing, because I don't think anyone's relinquishing their kind of one-sided game that they've got here. Jason, anything you want to get in before we begin to wrap up the first hour of 224?
Well, I'm very curious to see where this goes with jurisdiction and all that, but I guess I'll leave it there for the moment for hour one's sake.
Okay, and we're going to follow up with you, Derek, and keep in touch with us when you begin to learn where this is going. The whole reason that we made contact and did this is because we're so interested in the trailblazers, of which you are. Recognizing there's a problem, getting off your butt, slogging through law libraries, which is no damn fun for most people, and trying to figure out where we lost our rights and how do we defend them. And so the first times we tried to cover this, there was all this infighting. My way is better than your way. And you don't understand because you're signing in capital letters. And you don't understand because, all this stuff. And it got very confusing at first until I came to the conclusion, what works? That's what we're going to go after. What works? So you have shown once again that the municipality can be dealt with forthwith when they overstep and violate your rights. We've had a number of people that have showed you how to do it. Yours was not totally dissimilar from the way Alphonse handled it. Now, to get back to the title or the deed, it's not a title, the deed on your home, I'm guessing that most states are probably the same here and that people have no idea. We've had people that have come on and described what a certificate is, what a registration is. And most people just get these things and still think they own the thing that's been certified or registered. At the end of the day, we're going to follow what goes on with you, Derek. And if you can find success, or even if you find stumbling blocks, we will try to cover those things. That does bring the first hour of episode 225 to a close. We're going to come back and we're going to get into the rights at the federal level, which were originally designed when very beautiful buildings were built in Washington, D.C. I have heard it recently said that every ugly building built after those gorgeous buildings is unconstitutional. To show where we've gone here. A lot of people think that that doesn't matter. From my part, I think it matters more now than ever. We're starting to see curfews and the threat of National Guard. What's the next shoe that drops here going to do? We were all thinking, oh, people are going to go back to work now. And guess what? Someone slapped the race card down on the table. And if you don't think that was done with intent, I've got news for you. That's actually true news. Anyhow, join us on the other side for free speech at Crrow777radio.com. That is CRROW777radio.com. That is the only true Crow site. And now there's starting to be knockoffs on YouTube as well. It never ends. Join us on the other side. We're going to get into some critical ideas that deal directly with the rights of a living man or a living woman. There it is, man. Cheers. All right, man. Welcome back to Crrow777 Radio. This is the second hour of episode 225. Jason Lindgren is back with me, and so is Derek Soroka. We were just talking as we got going. This is the way I view what's going on here, and I'm saying this to hopefully snub and cut off at the ankles any infighting. I view all the people that we've been covering as trailblazers. They're some of the first that we're aware of, and they probably aren't the first. This has probably been going on at different levels for Lord knows how long. But what we're becoming aware is people are realizing something's wrong here. And they're starting to go back to try to challenge it, to figure out what, in fact, rights we have to defend in the eyes of the places we live. And one of the things that came up is we've had people on that went right back to their option was to go away from federal citizen to state citizen only. And I'm starting to think that one thing I can deduce, partially from this conversation and others, is there are states that came to be after we had the Civil War. Some of what was pointed out in hour one and in other things we've done is the people who have far-seeing vision point out that what happened during the Civil War is not what people think. Sometimes it gets described as removing the head from the body, the North and the South. This whole thing happened. And it's like all theaters of war. What you think is going on is not what's going on. The point I would make is how different are the charters or constitutions of those 13 original so-called colony states from something that came later that was made statehood after the Civil War. I can't answer these things, but I'm logically deducing that kind of where we are right now, we see people that have gone back to state citizenship and they're happy with it. We've seen other people that are sick of their state and they want the federal protections that they perceive are still existing in the ideas set down by the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, I know people are going to argue it's not the one we started with. It was changed. Just set all that aside. What we're trying to get down to is it's a bit like walking into a 31 flavors. You're going to get 10 people walk in. Each one wants a different flavor of ice cream. Maybe there's some of that going on here. I don't know. Point is, what works? These trailblazers are going to leave a record of what has been successful. Over time, that is going to begin to open up the floodgate for the rest of us to better understand what the trailblazers did and what they figured out and why they did what they did. Why did they drop state citizenship? Why did they want the protections at the federal level? What we're learning from the past few guests is that when you're in your municipality, those people are so freaking far gone because they've been corporatized and they don't understand that they've been corporatized. What they think they are doing is what they are trained and what they are required to do, which is true. You can't tell me that's not true. In those minds, that is what's going on. But now when you get over to that guy minding his own business in his yard and some crap comes knocking on his door, now there's these other whole set of circumstances and it's clear the system is broken. And so let's stick with what works. Let's get into the ideas here and let's view it through a kind of synoptic lens. Let's use one eye and not try to label it all and say what's better. Let's try to go with what we've learned and what works. Anyhow, welcome back, Jason.
And good afternoon.
All right. You want to throw anything down or should we jump in here?
Well, I like what you were already saying, so let's let Derek take off from that.
Okay. Welcome back, Derek.
All right, thanks, guys. So before the Civil War, when our forefathers set up this country, they realized the importance of property and why the individuals need to own it. Because when they separated from Europe, and those factions were still under monarchies, and the feudalism was just depriving people of their rights. The fact that they couldn't own their property destroyed their standing.
Let me make the example. This is going to tie in directly with my efforts of a couple of years of research to try to figure out a better explanation for how Rome fell and how the Vatican started. How the hell did Senate doors go from ancient Rome to St. John's Basilica? How did that happen? The history we're getting, well, this plays into it. In the research I did, I found actual documentation that claims that the noble families, which included the priestly families from the Jewish temple that was hauled off to Babylon in bondage and wormed their way into Rome, and became the new kind of upper crust families, they owned 98% of the arable land. That is what we're talking about here. And that's the precursor for supposed kings and queens and everything that's gone on, where if your family was starving and you went into the woods and killed an animal, you might get damn well hung by the noble family or king for poaching because they own it all. And so there is the preface for why the people who left there to come here recognize the importance of what Derek is pointing out. Go ahead, Derek.
Right. So our forefathers knew how important that was, especially Catholic Church was just bad in feudalism as the kings and queens of Europe. So, we had our revolution, and some could suggest that the Jesuits were behind that, especially when you look at when they were disbanded by the Vatican and when our revolution occurred. That's right there, tie and tie. But sometimes if you look in the past and you look at our forefathers' quotes about the Jesuits, you'll see that they were very good at infiltrating the opposition so that they could control the opposition. But I'll kind of leave that alone for now. So when we established our country, we wanted our property rights. We had to find a way to establish that ownership. So George Washington, and I want to say Hamilton also, created the Trade and Patent Office. That was formed immediately after the U.S. Constitution was formed. And they knew that you had to have a right to be able to exclude people from your property, to tell them, you can't use this, you can't be on it, go, right? And that included not only inventions, because that's how everybody plays it online. It was, well, patents are just for things that you're creating and you want to sell. No, it's not true. George Washington said that even if you discover land and you want to make your homestead there, you have that right to put it under patent and then exclude others from using it. So that land patent helped enforce the Fifth Amendment, the United States Constitution, to include the 14th Amendment later, because it got restated there as well. And that's the takings clause. You have to be tried in order to have your property taken away. And that comes full circle with my whole in rem and personam jurisdiction. You have to be tried. So they established the patent office, and they started issuing land and land patents. The federal government did, especially because they wanted the inhabitants to spread, to get over the Appalachian Mountains, to go out, to get your land, get it settled. Let's make our country bigger, and we're going to make sure you have the right to it.
The idea of manifest destiny, coast to coast. But yes. I guess I could throw a monkey wrench. So you suppose there's anyone out there who's gone out and patented everything coast to coast after the fact?
People have tried, and you can still get a land patent, especially if you're a big corporation like a mining corporation, and you need stuff like mineral rights that's in the soil and stuff like that. But that's primarily all it's used now, because the local states don't honor land patents for residences as official titles to the property. They will only accept it as it was part of the chain of ownership at one point, but it doesn't mean that that person owns the property anymore.
Well, I'm having a little trouble with that. If the patent is at the federal level, then the state can't contradict what's done at the federal level. So are you suggesting that what the state is doing is not on the up and up, or are you insinuating something altogether different?
Oh, it's definitely the states, and the federal government just hasn't done anything to stop them.
So basically what we're pointing out here is if you did have a patent on land and your state refused to recognize it as anything more than chain of custody type idea on that particular piece of land or parcel, what the state is doing violates the rights that were laid down at the federal level, which, to make the bad pun, trump what's going on at the state level.
True. And with the new Bureau of Land Management, are they even going to protect you on the federal level, from state actions? So a lot of the system has become corrupt, and that's why I didn't apply for a land patent for my land. I kind of see problems with both the governments in this realm. That's why I established my own land claim and publicly posted it. I don't need government's permission to own property that I settled. We have these land patents. Even the states were issuing land patents. Michigan, their territorial government they had here did it for a while. Even as a state, they did it for a little while. But when that Civil War kicked off, it changed everything. And it basically established that the Union will overthrow a state government if it does not obey. And the state governments really had the right to secede. If there was a problem with the Union, they could leave and try to get back together, establish something better. But when they, I think Virginia or whoever was, North Carolina, one of the first ones that seceded, it kicked things off. And then the Union formed, and it overthrew the state governments unconstitutionally. It was a nationwide martial law that was declared in the Libra Code, which is a general order from, I guess, General Lieber at that time. And this was during Abraham Lincoln's time, where they established martial law under general order for the military. There's like 100 different rules of what they could do. And they could basically just come in and confiscate whatever property they wanted to put back into the Union. And they could also imprison somebody without giving them any court or anything. They suspended habeas corpus.
See, this is the problem I always have. So is that a legal way to subvert what's, protected in the Constitution? And by the way, was that martial law ever rescinded?
That martial law was never rescinded. It even stated in the Lieber Code that to finalize it and cut it, there had to be a peace treaty at the end of the Civil War, and there was never one. So technically, they could still be operating under that power. I have never seen them invoke this reasoning for what they do. So, and it may be too far gone for them to try to use it now. But, actions kind of speak otherwise sometimes too. You see federal government flexing its might. There was a problem with sanctuary cities for a while, and the federal government tried to tell them, you need to shut those down. And the states were like, oh, no, we're good. We're going to keep them, because they were getting a lot of money for having those.
I've long suspected that there was something about the Civil War that was never fixed.
Yep.
There seems to be so much difference from pre-Civil War and post-Civil War. It's like the country was destroyed. It's over. What's going forth from that point is actually something kind of different.
You want to know how I view that whole thing? And I'll let you echo in on the tail of what I say here, Derek. You have people who've wanted to control it all since Lord knows when. And when the newest big place, the United States, started to fraction apart, the idea of getting your arms around that started to look like a bigger and bigger task. So the Civil War basically stuffed it all back in one shoebox by hook or crook. And again, I urge people to look at the occult sides of what has happened supposedly in the Civil War. There are tons of people that will tell you the Civil War was nothing like you've been shown in history. And I'll tell you what, I served during the first Gulf War. I would be willing to bet that most people who had nothing to do with it have a very different idea and vision of what actually went down. I refer to that period of time as the theater of war because I think it's the most accurate description. But what's your take on it, Derek? Did we have some overarching control mechanisms trying to stuff everyone back in a big group that could later be controlled in 2020, to make a bad pun?
Absolutely. Well, for now, what's going on right now?
Yeah. If we were all fractioned apart, a north and a south, this state, separated from, the United States, it would have been a whole different game to try to roll over what's happened here.
Texas tried to secede a couple of years back, and they had enough military there. They probably could have done it. They had a big chunk of the Army, Air Force there. And, I think somehow it got to the governor or the officials there like, we can't do that. We're not even going to be able to make it if we try to do that. There's going to be a big war if we do that, just like last time. It would have been a civil war all over again.
So is it your view that the martial law that was declared supposedly in the time of Lincoln, was that illegal? Was it a legal act? Does it violate constitutional constructs?
So I don't like to call martial law legal ever. I think it's the resolution they use when the citizens decide law is not good enough anymore. There's a big problem, but it should only be really enforced if there's dangers like what we had recently with the looting, the burning, people getting hurt. And I think a lot of that was contrived too.
But it also does the same thing that COVID does. Instead of taking the age-old common sense, if there's a bunch of sick people that might get someone else sick, you quarantine the sick people for 14 days, by the way. And what we actually saw was the entirety of the world was quarantined. And so this idea that's going on now, so a couple banks got burned down in California, some other crap went down in other cities. So does that make all the citizens, or does that make you can become actionable on everybody because some minor subset lost their damn minds? Probably contrived, almost certainly contrived. That's my point. Matter of fact, Jason, maybe this would be a good thing to get in on, is to get someone on who could address whether these supposed threats of martial law have any legal standing in our world. But anyhow, go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, it's definitely a power play. I don't think hopefully this gets resolved soon and doesn't go any further, because if they mix the two problems together, we're going to have soldiers at the doors testing everybody or trying to do forced vaccinations. I don't think soldiers will allow themselves to follow orders that blatantly bad, because they don't like things happening in their own house like that. So, I asked my guys back when I was in charge of platoon, would you go door to door and confiscate guns from citizens? And they all said no. That's against the U.S. Constitution. I'm like, what if I ordered you to do it? They said no, absolutely not. So soldiers need to know. Policemen need to know the difference between a lawful and an unlawful order. Just because you have a superior tell you to do something does not make it lawful. When you have a governor and a president that give you an executive order, that's not law. That is an order for their executive departments. So they're telling their police or their military, whoever, what to do. Now, the only thing that can justify whether, if the government has a right to do something or not is the citizens. We have to protest, petition, and unfortunately revolt when things get too bad. That is one of the resolutions. But we try to get things done peacefully because we got one of the best countries. I mean, we've been groundbreaking on so much. But when you have a republic and you form it, it was to become a superpower of the world, just like Rome was. And we had the biggest, baddest military, all that. But we've lost a lot of rights in the process. And now we're revolting more than ever, probably, to try to get them back. To get back on topic, though, the Civil War, ever since that kicked off, the states, I think the way I see things is that they were sick of the way the federal government could just jump in and overtake them. So they decided to take away the right for the land to be held in a federal land patent and only recognize their deeds that they issue out. And so now they have the say of what goes on with the land. And literally, they leave you no option. If you want the local government to recognize you as the homeowner, you have to go have the deed transferred. You have to go register the deed, become the new taxpayer. That's it. Otherwise, you're not even allowed to be there. And when you do that, you lose your right to own the property and you get taxed. So it's a catch-22. I can move on to my resolution now, what I've planned to implement,
Okay.
if that's what you want me to do.
Yeah, go for it.
So I didn't want to claim this much territory, but if I figured that I had the right to tell the government what not to do with my land, my little parcel, the police there would be too difficult to have many jurisdictions within one county, right? So I needed an entire law enforcement jurisdiction. That's what a county is, to be able to say, this is a new sect of law where I am going to own the land. I am going to, once the owner becomes like of their part of land, becomes free and clear of all their liens, whether it's mortgage or a contractor lien or whatever. If they're free and clear of all that, then they notify office that I got, and then we'll issue them title to their parcel. And then they will have that. So that way we can slowly start getting the land back to the people in the county. And then this is going to flip the power from us serving the government to the government serving us. And then whatever they need for municipalities, for fire, EMS, police, school, whatever they request, then we can give to them proportionally with our discretion to say, you did not do what you were supposed to do last year. You failed horribly. So fix it, or you're not going to get the funding from me this year coming up, you know?
Well, that's tricky, man. As I'm listening to what you're saying, the overarching idea, I like it. I like how you've included those around you, recognizing that we're all connected. But you could start to imagine that if you don't get your firemen that the supposed authority is requesting, the actual people who take the brunt of that are the guy whose house is on fire. And I could also imagine contractors, as an example, that are used to doing corporate business. I used to work for some huge corporations in San Diego that were contractors, and they actually had a section of their corporation that did nothing but interface with the city for ordinances and codes and permits and just all this stuff. As a matter of fact, that person was supposed to make relationships so they could grease the wheels. But what happens when they get to a municipality that all of a sudden isn't corporatized? Will these corporate institutions want to do business there? I'm wondering. But then again, when I think about it, it would be a lot closer to maybe getting paid in cash in the system that you're talking about.
Yeah, or working your own barter system. You know, some people can't afford the taxes that the place, that your government's requesting.
I live in that place. Where I live when I was a child was all farmers and fishermen. Now it's all heart surgeons and CEOs. It's been gentrified. And the reason it was gentrified is because the taxes taxed people out of existence. First, they wrote into the code that if you were still on a working farm, you got these breaks. And then slowly over time, we realized what happened to farms, right? You couldn't run your 40 acres anymore. So as soon as that 10 acres was no longer farming, then the taxes started to hit. And as time went on, they didn't have enough money this year. So they upped the taxes. And now what we see is the character of where I live is basically the description of gentrification through taxation, just to make a fine point on why what you're talking about matters. And I'm guessing of all the people that are listening to us right now, there's any number of you that are in similar situations.
Sure. And, maybe you do feel like the government does deserve to have that much. You just don't have the means to make it. So why can't you have an option to where maybe there's a government building that just does commercial stuff, that sells product or whatever, just to help boost economy for the local municipalities. Maybe you could go work there for a week or two and just help them raise revenue. And that'll be good enough to compensate for what you would have paid for property taxes. We could set something up like that. It's not hard to do. It's not difficult at all. When I drive around my local town here, especially in Lansing, there's so many failed businesses, abandoned buildings that are taking up the commercial district. And a lot of them got taxed out too.
Yep.
Ridiculous.
And then they turned around and sold these Craftsman 3 stories for $1,000 or something.
Yep.
I have ties to Michigan. I know in spades what was done to Detroit by design, and people have no idea how beautiful some of these kind of dilapidated neighborhoods, these buildings, they're incredible. And it's just a shame to see what's gone on, because those are resources, is what Derek's pointing out, or they could be.
Absolutely. And the big thing is to not lose our fire, our police, or anybody that works in the government. They're probably trying to do the right thing. The problem is that we should not have to lose our rights in order for them to exist.
Right.
So we should be able to raise revenue in the way that does not cause us to relinquish power.
Well, part of what's laid the foundations here was even things like Walmart seem to have been a long-scale plan to destroy all the smaller businesses, and there's nothing about Walmart that doesn't disturb me. I've had like maybe 10 emails in the last 2 days informing me that as the protests went on, they were the first to barricade themselves in before it started, and now there's apparently loudspeakers. And this is how we head towards tyranny. Is it true that Walmart is just a play on the word martial law? I'll accept that possibility all day long. Anyone ever walked into a Walmart and looked up to the 35-foot high ceiling and asked, why in the hell would you build a commercial space that you have to heat and cool all over the country with an extra 20 feet of blank air in there so no one can reach anything? Why are all the parts of the building that don't interface with the customer behind concrete walls with lockable doors? That place looks like a big prison. I had people email me probably close to 5 years ago that they worked in, I think it was Oklahoma, and a Walmart was going in and they were doing the underground piping. And he sent me pictures, because it was the only time he'd ever been asked to do it or ever seen it, that the pipes coming out from under the Walmart had to be caged and lockable doors on those pipes. This is what we're talking about. What does all that crap mean? Are we being paranoid? I don't think so. If we're wrong, great. But this is a time where it's better to be wrong and paranoid than not. What's going on here? And it's the crux of everything we've talked about. And if you want to boil it down to a single freaking potato in your bowl, it's called corporation. That's the new tyranny of our time, is corporation. I mean, isn't it, Derek?
Yeah, and your government serve them more than you. So, and your government is a corporation too. Don't get that wrong. It's a for-profit corporation. They don't ever try to lower their budget to help the citizens. They're not out there to actually make our lives that much better. They always want to make sure they exist, and that it's at our expense. And we just have to accept that. Whatever rights we lose in the process is for the greater good of all.
It's actually worse than that. In the place where I am, there is actually still democracy, where even though we're a little too big for it, people can still show up and voice their concerns to the public or the city council. But what we have seen in the last couple of rounds of city council elections is people who've come in that don't know the first thing about running a municipality or the laws or anything else. They've done things like brought a lawyer who was their buddy in with no bid and pissed off all the people who understand how it's supposed to run. No, you got to bid these things. Someone's got to prove that they're worth it, and you've got to justify the expense if they're more expensive by showing they're more expensive for this reason. And that's why we're doing it. And so what we've actually seen is we're getting to a point now where the municipalities, these supposed people who are supposed to know how a town operates, have no idea about rights, about laws, about anything. It's gotten almost to be like the blind leading the blind. Quite a thing to watch.
Even when I submitted my complaint to the federal court, I said, let's make this good for the state of Michigan too. How about if this goes through, state of Michigan will be recognized as the only state in the entire government, the entire union, that has decided that property titles need to go back to the people, and that it's going to be at least in one county area, to test the waters, see if we can make it work, and get a better democracy going. So this republic has overreached. So
it is going to be so damn interesting to see what happens to you, because all I see is those crypto freaking ninjas, man, saying, nah, you ain't changing our little everybody stuffed in one box. And by the way, this is what we're doing after the race card nonsense we just caused. But I hold out hope. I hold out hope that there still is a foundational idea of universal rights, and that to violate those, you're paying a price somewhere in time. I hold out. I buy these things. I've read them through Lord knows how much time and very old research, the ideas. And then I look at what I see. Well, why the hell are they hinting all this crap in movies in their cryptic way? Well, that's why. Do you think they're doing it so they can have a laugh? I'm sure that's part of it. But would they do it just to have the laugh? I don't think so, because it exposes them, doesn't it? When enough people get that other eyeball working a little bit better, these jokes are going to fall flat on the floor and people are going to see through. And people like me ain't helping. You know, I'll tell you right now, damn well, every time something happens, look at every last name, every first name, and figure out what it means. Look at where it's happened. Look at the topology, the toponymy, the latitude, the longitude, the name of the town, everything, the street, the building it happened in, and you will see the magic that is going on. But I mean, the big 640 trillion gazillion $1 million question here is, can you get resolution in a federal court? Can you get it? If you do everything right, can you get it?
You can do everything right and not get it. It depends on how corrupt the system gets.
Is that a joke?
No, that's true.
I think that's what we call a truism.
Yeah. I could win. I could win in the district court, and then it could go to appeal. And then that you don't really have a jury for anymore. It's just sent to multiple judges who are going to write their piece on yay or nay, whether it gets challenged again in court. And it's got to be the majority of the judges said, yes, we'll retry it, or no, the decision stays. If it stays, then that should be the end of the scenario there. But it could go all the way up to Supreme Court. And yep. And then you have absolutely no jury. You're at the mercy of the supreme justices of the nation.
Put in place by the bloodline that we call presidents.
Yeah. Even if you lose there, it's pretty bad, because it sets a precedent for all other lawyers to be like, hey, look, see, this guy couldn't do it, so don't think you can either, right? This is how attorneys and lawyers think, is stare decisis is what it's called. Whatever was decided in court is the new law, and that's what they call case law. Well, I'll tell you right now, the judicial branch does not create law. That's not its purpose. It can referee a legal argument and make a decision based on the facts that are provided, following their rules and everything else. But that, in the end, is still just a legal opinion, a legal decision. It's not law. So it can always be challenged. It can be overturned even.
So I think what you're referring to, if I remember back to my junior college law, is that stare decisis?
Yeah, I say stare decisis or stare decisis, because I don't see too many other apostrophes and stuff in there. But
right, it's from the Latin. And what do you know? What the direct? I've forgotten. What's the direct definition? Do you know?
I think it means to let the decision stand or something like that.
I think you're in the ballpark. Let me look it up real quick.
And this is something that attorneys are trained to use. This is their big thing. They want to memorize what was the biggest Supreme Court cases, for this and that, what justifies the amendments. Well, court cases they didn't create the amendments. They didn't create the Constitution. So they can be a decision to help decide whether certain things apply, but
here's something interesting. We all know what Wikipedia is. So Wikipedia ties the idea of stare decisis to precedent. But if you go over to the Merriam-Webster Merriam dictionary, which I hold in a bit higher regard, it'll tell you that stare decisis, as it is spelled, or stare, it would be STARE DEC and then ISIS of all things. Okay. So stare decisis. It is a doctrine or a policy of following rules or principles laid down in a previous judicial decision, unless they contravene or go against the ordinary principles of justice. But you see, the perversion in calling that precedent doesn't include all the facts about what
Right.
it actually is. What they're saying is the outcome is all that matters, which is not true. See, for the outcome to matter, it has to have measured up along the way to be a valid outcome, I would point out. So you can even see online what happens, what Wikipedia decides to tell you it is, and what the dictionary, which actually defines words. And I'm guessing damn well if we went to Black's Law, it would have a lot more to say.
Right. And, this is kind of starting to reflect on how the legal professionals are trained. I also watch a lot of YouTube videos that cover law courses taught by professors. The Yale has courses on YouTube, Harvard Law, and so does Josh Blackman. He's a professor down in Houston, Texas, who teaches property law, constitutional law. And I listen to all these guys, and they definitely curtail a lot of what the Constitution says and kind of cherry pick what they want from it, right? They are good about explaining the Enlightenment thinkers, how the government was supposed to be set up, but then they completely bypass, the patenting of property and why that was so important to the founding fathers. Is so insane to see what our lawyers are being taught, and then knowing that they believe that the judge creates law. Well, whatever the judge says, the judge says. We just got to believe the judge.
That's what Wikipedia just did, the precedent nonsense.
Right.
And is the judge allowed to interpret as he or she sees fit? What do they call it? Color of law?
No, color of law is kind of like you're using law ill-intentionally or not the way it was prescribed to be used.
Misusing authority basically is color of law.
Right. Which they kind of are doing too, but that's very hard to prove. I don't want to sit there and get in an argument with the judge saying you're doing something wrong that's unconstitutional.
A judge can only interpret what's already on the books. At no time can a judge make law, and that is further demonstrated in the fact that if you don't find what you're looking for at a lower court, you continue on up the chain. It's unfortunate that our highest court is stacked up to its eyeballs by people who are part of the problem in this world, who are not voted into office, who are set by the Electoral College, which was put in by the Founding Fathers, who were already looking forward for their own intensive bloodlines to come out on top all the time. That's a fact. People can argue it all day long, and we've said things like George Washington, and as we said it, I could imagine all the minds doubting that George Washington's even who the hell you think he is. That's fine. That's all. That's well. That's good. The point is, let's ask a simple question here. We were all born with some rights and a divine spark. Is it your contention that the documents that were drafted to protect those who would infringe on those rights, can we still find protection under those documents? Things like the common law that they were drawn from, things like the Constitution. Do they still exist currently in a way where we can find protection for what the Creator gave us when we were conceived?
I say yes, but we have to fight to keep it in existence.
I agree.
It's not going to stay on its own. And a lot of judges interject themselves into these courtroom hearings and stuff, and they start arguing for either party. That's not their job. Hear what each party has to say, make sure rules are being followed. They should not be instructing the jury what's a fact in a case or not. A lot of them do that. It's up to the jury to decide whether evidence should be admitted and stuff like that.
And can that be argued, though, if a judge starts doing something like that?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be a mistrial. If you get the judge on a mistrial, you can throw that court. And
then what happens? It gets bumped to another judge in a different court?
It should.
Yeah.
You can
mistrial means
venue change.
Right. Well, you could. You wouldn't necessarily get unless you request it, but that if it's a mistrial, I think that judge is done, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could order a dismissal and on your own account, be like, I declare this trial mistrial, and order your own dismissal. And
let me ask you, while we still got a little time here, Derek, have you followed some of the things that we've covered, like the gentleman from Australia, Cal Washington, notices of liability? Are you familiar with these things?
I've heard of a lot of people. I don't know if I've heard that exact episode that you guys did with that.
So let's cut to the chase. We wanted to have you on because I view you as a trailblazer. I know that you were a staff sergeant in the military, so I know you're responsible because I was in the military, and I know people don't get those positions without being responsible. And anyone who's going to go sit in a damn law library for God knows how long is serious about what they're doing. And that's why we were interested. We wanted to know what works. You confirmed exactly what Alphonse said. And at the municipality, you get run over like you're a redheaded stepchild, and then you get up to the federal level and you hand it right back to them and you win. But the point I would make here is I think what matters right now is we're on the cusp of people trying to declare martial law, of riots being incited, because from my point of view, the very event they're claiming happened was a put up from the beginning, provably, in my eyes. And I don't have time to argue it. If you want to see it differently, go ahead. Be my guest. I don't. Point is what do we have? What can we work with here? And that's why we're doing so many guests like you. And not only another thing is how fearlessly you went in, determining that you're not going to jail for any of this. So why can't you figure it out? Why can't you experiment? Why can't you learn what works? Standing on the shoulders of other peoples who showed you how to get ready, how to get started, listening to Alphonse and recognizing that there was a slight difference in the way you were going about it and him. But my point is if we're going to get out from under this, it's got to be something like this, because the option is we get into it, and we get into it ugly, and all control on every side is lost. And I don't ever want to see that again.
I wanted to add my part to the whole legal information you guys are putting out is, in order to get control back of the government, you got to be in control of funding the government.
At the base of it, this is the point, though. So suppose it goes south, and the idea of revolution and all these things that I would not want to have to participate in or witness. When that's said and done, whoever supposedly comes out on top, you know what you got? You got a pile of rubble. That's what you got. That's where you're working from now. You ain't got a gas station on the corner. You ain't got, Lord knows what you ain't got, to use superior English. It's all been destroyed, or the chains and the people that made it run were hurt or injured or worse. Or the flip side of that is there were these documents that were designed for living men and women. There are these methods, the notice of liability, the idea of common law, the idea of the Magna Carta, the idea of the Constitution that are protecting. And to me, this is where we better put our eggs as quickly as we can from as many people, not in groups, individually, because they understand how to move forward, because decentralization has to be the way now. You form a group and you've just painted a target on your back. And by the way, how many Target stores, to make a pun, just closed because one of them got looted? It makes no sense. What they're doing is they're choking. They're strangling us off. But if, in fact, the federal courts will still show us a way, there could be paper generated there that would cripple anything wanted to go on. And it wouldn't take that many people to do it. Even the records requests alone would be a hell of a thing. If a single office got 100 requests, what would happen? It would open the eyes of the management all the way to the top guy overnight. And when you're looking at people like what Alphonse has done, he recognizes that liens could be brought to bear, fines could be brought to bear. And as you pointed out, Derek, you basically told the court, give me all my damn money back, and they did. So what happens when someone wins one of these cases and says, by the way, court, give me every penny I've ever paid in taxes, or some other thing that I'm just making up off the top of my head? And that's why these episodes are critically important, because I think the average person has watched too many movies and doesn't understand that when things truly go south, that idea of revolution, I don't know, maybe the fake John Lennon had it right.
That's why I set up this case to not be going for damages. If I would have done that, that would have opened up the floodgates for class action lawsuits for U.S. citizens all over the country. And I told it in my original complaint form. I said, I don't want that to happen. So this is the way I had to go about in order for a peaceful resolution to come out. And we'll both come out on top on the end.
So what's the way forward here? What are you going to be working on next, Derek? Where do you want to take this?
So if the federal case wins, they recognize me as being the true lawful owner of all this land, and I can start implementing a new taxing system, then we can start getting communities stronger. I have a big map of the entire county. I'm trying to map out the residential areas, and visit each one to figure out how can we get more of a HOA type of thing going on, homeowners association basically, where people can pool their resources together and start taking care of each other a little more versus always relying on the government. So the more you have to rely on it, the more they're going to need money from you and they're going to take your power.
It's ironic. You know how many HOA emails I got on the tail of Alpha? A lot of people don't like those. But let me be the devil's advocate here for a second. Can you imagine if you found success? The first thing I would suspect is going to go on is people who aren't so caring are going to go try to make land grabs and claim that they own this county or that. And I think that's a huge stumbling block.
Well, now they can't just come in. It's not going to be just taken over, because me owning it with the highest title doesn't relinquish all the bank loans and mortgages and liens that are on it. You know, that's still a legal power right there.
Well, wouldn't the first thing to be done, though, is if you succeeded and your claim was recognized, is that you immediately go to every person within that county and say, here, you own your land now, because I own it now, but I'm giving it back to you.
Because if I were to do that, that would hurt our financial system we have. So, here, I'm sure it'd be great that people wouldn't have to pay on the interest anymore, but
I see. I guess in a way that would break the idea of a county, wouldn't it? Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. So we've got to get off the liens and stuff. But yeah, I'm trying to also get some school programs set up so that we can start educating the youth more on law, make it a tiered program and teach it through the townships that'll be in my area. I'll even have a representative go there and teach a class every now and then, just to keep them up to speed of what's going on.
I like the altruistic ideas. I like, more than anything, the idea that it wasn't, I've got a problem, I'll solve it for me, but my problem doesn't end here. My neighbor's got the same problem. Everyone in this area has the same problem. And what kills me all the time is people go through accidents in life, never having used the simple game of chess as the reminder to how we should go through life. I'm about to do this thing. There's going to be an outcome. What are the possible outcomes I can imagine? That one step that is drummed out of us from the time we're in school to the entertainment and everything else we're exposed to is the most critical thing to holding on to common sense. Because a lot of times, what looks like a damn good idea, when you stop and think about what the outcomes could be, a lot of times it's not the best idea going. And that's what I enjoy about what you're laying down here. I'll be completely frank with you. If you pull this off, I will be so amazed, but I want to hear about it every step of the way, man. What else do you want to get in before we begin to wrap up hour 2?
Right. So 2 things. For one, if the case doesn't push further soon, I will have to go to media to get social backing, locally. I already have people I know that work for the local news agency here to interview me and already show that this case is filed and it's being neglected. If it gets neglected too long, there's going to be a lot of social pressure on the federal district to move the case forward.
Well, doesn't that relate to due process?
Absolutely.
Yeah, isn't that a federal violation?
Yeah, it is. And I'm not saying federal courts are good either. They've got problems.
No, I'm pointing out, couldn't there be some fines or other things imposed for the lack of recognition of the rights here? Due process is one of the rights that is protected by those documents.
Yeah, if I wanted to open up a whole nother case and sue the federal government for doing this, and they even pushed another case through during this whole COVID time that had to do with a bar member suing for the fees being too much that she had to pay for every year. I'm like, I'm fighting for U.S. constitutional rights to own property, and we're worried about bar membership fees.
Yeah,
and that case went all the way through to me.
There it is, man. The proof in the pudding of where we actually exist.
To wrap this all the way back up, the legal professionals get certified from the Bar Association. And could you imagine what time the bar associations all got founded in the United States?
Actually, I have no idea.
Directly after the Civil War.
Of course.
Okay, so that's another indication that something changed.
Yep.
And it was British.
That's the original
as the word bar informs us. The first word there is British, is it not?
Yeah, and England still had theirs going on. That's where we got the idea and brought it over here. I'm saying we, like somebody decided to. May have been Abraham Lincoln, because if you look up his Wikipedia page or even his most famous autobiography, it says that he got his Illinois bar certification while he was here in the U.S. Well, if you look up Illinois bar, was not even established until after Lincoln was dead. Well, where did he get his legal training, and why did that suddenly come over here during his time, right?
Well, over in England,
yeah, over in England, they had these bar association already, and they had all the inns of court. The very first one that was established was called the Temple Inn, or the Inner Temple. That was originally formed by the Knights Templar.
Who are the priestly families from Solomon's Temple, which existed for... Yep. You know what? We ought to just start playing Johnny Rivers' Secret Agent Man right here and close the show. I mean, and not only that, I don't want to be rude, but Abraham Lincoln looks like a damn alien in the first place. I've never seen anyone that looks like that.
Yeah, that's it's crazy. So, and this may tie into Freemasons. They have a very close tie to the same belief system as a Knights Templar, and in the York Rite's highest rank is a Knights Templar. And in U.S., Freemasons everywhere, right? And they're heavily promoted in the police departments and the military. That's where they get a lot of recruitment at. They don't really actively recruit out. Otherwise, you just kind of come when you want to join, whenever.
That's because where they're recruiting, they're getting people who are very good at organization and following orders. And so that's how they maintain their window dressing, which is all the lower, below the Royal Archmasons that are just window dressing.
Right.
Not to mention to be able to influence larger groups of people at once.
And me being in the military, man, I have a sworn oath that I took, and it was in my contract, black and white. I had to sign it, put my name in it, initial it. It's even in there twice. You might have had it too in your contract that you did.
I did. We swore an oath. We swore an oath going in. Yeah.
That's an oath that we had to take. We had to live by. We were bound to that oath. When you go get on the stand in a courtroom, you have to swear an oath right there. The judge doesn't swear an oath for some reason. And wouldn't you know it, the U.S. Constitution, the third article of it is what set up the judicial branch. Well, what created that third article was called the Judiciary Act. And that has way more material in it than just the U.S. Constitution says. And I think it's section 35 of the Judiciary Act, it says all judges must have a sworn oath of office registered in their local county or state or wherever they're serving. And I went to my county and requested it. And the only oath I found there, because they do have them, was a person who doesn't even serve anymore. So
wait a minute, though, because that's huge. Because it is assumed that every officer, a so-called officer of the court, is sworn, and that the court clerk, the people taking the documents, they're all working under oath. What you're saying is that you found they're not even doing the oath anymore?
A lot of them are not.
Wow. See, now this is where my concerns about whether the federal court systems will break down starts to come in, because a big part of many of the legal remedies we've seen is built on the idea that all those people are under oath. You don't have a choice. I'm handing you a document. You got to take it. You got to file it. You got to stamp it. You're under oath. But you see, what happens when these people are holding those positions and they never took an oath? They could basically flip you off and say, I'm not under oath.
Right.
At the municipal level, I guess I'm still holding out hope that our federal court comes back in some semblance that we can recognize.
Yeah, hopefully, man. I hold out for them. I want them to do better. But if they don't recognize what the Bar Association and the law colleges have construed the law to be and how it's affected America, we're not going to get anywhere.
No, we're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, and that paddle actually has a barrel, and that's a nightmare.
By the way, what have you come across with the Bar Association?
Sometimes I'll go on YouTube and they have their own videos where like they'll say, in order to acquire personal jurisdiction, you just send a summons to somebody. When they show up, you have personal jurisdiction. Sad to say, this is something Alfonso actually mentioned too, but that's wrong. You have to have some type of agreement, legal agreement between you and that government. That's where that driver's license comes in. That's where if you apply for state benefits, you're showing that you are subject to that jurisdiction.
And is it corporate? For instance, you said the driver's license, the things you're applying for, does that automatically make it corporate or commercial?
You could say yes, in a way it does, but fighting that in court or explaining that in court are two different things. But on the outside, yeah, absolutely. You're creating a corporate identity, an account, just like when you create an account with anything, and that's held to, rules, and you may have to pay fees for it. I mean, it's just like Social Security and all the rest of the stuff.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out here is that all tying back to the corporate identity thing. That's something I've always wanted to pull apart as best as possible.
And that all came about after the Civil War as well. I mean, first you had to have right after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Those are ones that broke slavery, recognized, and I'm not going to say that part because I don't believe in that. The federal citizenship, that's been around since the beginning. But the 15th Amendment was to also help make sure, there wasn't discrimination or them kept from being able to vote and stuff like that. But the very next amendment was the 16th Amendment, which was the income tax. And that one came about after Social Security got established and, we got birth certificates and all that. Federal Reserve started kicking in right after that.
Well, it was all preceded too, because from the work we've done, if I remember, the Bureau of Census or whatever it is that started counting people to get certificates was put in 1913 or 15. So they were queuing up for this the whole time. I don't know. Was that the Bureau of Census? I might have that wrong, but people know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah. They started, it's back in the time. See, back in the day when living men and women existed and our language wasn't saying you, we were saying thee and thou and things like this. The Bible was the birth register and it was recognized universally everywhere. The child was born. It was written into the cover of the Bible, and that's what the Census Bureau, if I'm getting the Bureau right, which I think I am, I might not be, that's what they did away with. They started shifting it away, and that's what led us to the current slavery. But I would point out, one of the subtle differences between what you and Alphonse did is the idea of how you challenge someone of having jurisdiction. The way you've gone on at it, as far as I can tell, is the idea that if I'm a citizen of the state, then I'm under that jurisdiction. The way Alphonse went at it was prove to me, you've got jurisdiction, you can't do it. And so I think these are both valid ideas for the simple reason that Lord knows what's going to work in any of the 50 states, States are different. And so each of these things is an important idea. But what's more, who gives a damn if it works? It worked for you. It worked for Alphonse. So in my book, there's two possible paths for someone who's getting jammed up. But I'll tell you what, I'll give you one more shot. Jason, anything you want to get into hour two?
Where do you stand right now as far as your legality and where are you trying to take it to?
Right now, currently, I am just a citizen of the United States, the federal government. That's who I served. I have a passport ID. That is my actual ID from the federal government. So, if I get pulled over, if I get checked by police, this is my only ID. That's the only jurisdiction you can tie me to. I maintain that. I'm not in the military anymore. I left in November. So mainly it was for this fight. I realized everything I was doing in the military wasn't really helping our country out that much. So I wanted to make the change now. And this is my last go, I've had so many tours. I'm ready to just get this going. If this works, great. It'll be the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. If not, at least I gave it a shot. I don't know what else to say legally on that. I don't consider myself a higher standard than other citizens. We are all United States citizens. We're even all American nationals before citizens. That's expressed in the Immigration and Services website. I'm here with everybody else struggling through the same stuff, and I'm just trying to do my best to make things better.
Well, I think you're doing it. I think you're a trailblazer. You're going to find things that work, and you may find things that fail hard. I mean, maybe you'll find big successes, but this is where it starts. And nothing starts until people can see there's something wrong here. When enough people begin to see there's something wrong, then enough people begin looking into the things that you're looking into, that Alphonse did, that the notice of liability is trying to address, because we're getting steamrolled. And it's pretty simple. We're getting steamrolled by corporations. Even our very governments, for the most part, are corporations. This is the world we live in, and it's going to have to be wrangled back into something we can accept, or we're going to get slaved out for a while. And while all created things have their end, I don't want to end the end of my life dealing with being slaved out. I don't want to have to see violence again in my life. I don't want to do these things, but there's no getting away from it. We dropped the ball. If we hadn't dropped the ball, this creep wouldn't have happened and corporations wouldn't have took over everything. So what Jason and I will do is we'll keep looking for things that have worked and interesting avenues that people have gone down. Derek, we're going to ask you to keep in contact. Let us know what happens. And by gum, if you pull this off, man, I want an email the same damn day. Because I might break my rule and actually eat a cake that day. If you can pull that off. I'm just saying. But anyhow, I'm going to wrap it up here, Jason. Anything else?
Derek, do you want anyone to contact you at all? Because it's going to be requested of us when this episode goes out.
Yeah, you can give them my email address. That's fine. I'll help as many as I can. But, if they come at me with individual problems, it's kind of like I sit here and spell out law to you each individual time. I can point you in the direction of what you should look into and what I'm doing, and maybe you could organize something in your own community. But also, I wanted to tell you guys, thank you so much for having me on, because me doing 3 years of research and doing everything I've done has been completely stressful. And it's more stressful when I can't let people know what I've found out and what I've discovered. It's very hard to gain an audience about this stuff. So I'm not trying to sell a book. I had a website up at one time. Maybe I'll put one up again. But for right now, I just wanted to expose what I have found, and hopefully people can get on the right path to help do what they need to do.
What is your YouTube channel, Derek?
It's just my name. So Derek Soroka, the actual website spelled out. I don't have it pulled up.
So the YouTube channel is DEREK SYROKA. You have a login for Crrow777 Radio, right, Derek?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm going to send you an email the day this goes live. I'm hoping you'll show up in comments. You can address a few things, put down an email address if you so choose. If you do, it is likely you will be barraged. So I'm just telling you. You have no idea what happened to Clive DeCarlo and Phoenix Arroyo. There's been a few times when it's just been insane. But all right, Derek, thank you so much. Thanks for having served all the time. 12 years is a long time to do it. And I'll tell you what, you served in a tough time, because after that first theater of war that we call the first Gulf War, things got very damn difficult for people who were in those positions running platoons. I
did almost 18 years, though. I did another 6 in reserve afterwards.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention, most people have at least 4 coming on the backside. Some people end up getting 6, but you were also a grunt. You were in a grunt unit, which makes it all the more. I don't think the average person who's never served has any idea of how hard that work is. But what you will find to a person is people who give a damn about each other, who have been in leadership positions, who are not going to leave anyone behind, and who are responsible. That's what I found with the people that I worked with in the military to this day. Anyhow, that does bring hour 2 of episode 225 to a close. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we're going to keep at it. We're going to do a little bit of diversity here and there. We're going to try to get a Wayne episode in. Maybe I shouldn't have even said that, because I'm not sure which is going to run first. But as we can find workable solutions, we will include them, because I think it's important for us to get back, figure out our rights, and figure out how to protect them, because the option to that is a bloody freaking mess. There it is, man. Cheers.